Why, when it comes to esports, are we not driving cars like this in simulators like the original Assetto Corsa? This is the 2004 Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car by the modding group 101 Creative, and it is a pure driver's car. And my argument is, if you really want to test esports drivers and also have something that's a really interesting visual spectacle for people watching esports, you really need to go back to older vehicles that, quite frankly, are better race cars. This doesn't even just apply to simulators. Look at modern motorsport. The vast majority of it is objectively worse from the driver's perspective and the spectator's perspective than stuff from 2004 or prior. Don't get me wrong, I do still think there's obviously a place for modern GT3 cars, and I do actually see the appeal of them, especially for endurance racing. They are undoubtedly popular. There's a lot of money that goes behind the marketing, and you know, when it comes to esports, it's about getting viewership on stuff. Sim race is not huge. GT3 is one of the biggest things outside of Formula 1 and some of the other big series. So, you know, I totally understand the obsession with GT3, but let's be honest, it doesn't make sense as the type of vehicle to test a driver's ability at raw racecraft, raw car handling, raw car control. It just literally doesn't make sense. Like a car that's heavy, quite large, and has lots of assists on it is going to produce much less dynamic racing than either a proper design for racing Formula vehicle like Formula Ford, F4, F3, F2, you know, IndyCar. It's going to be worse than them for like raw precision type racing, and then it's going to be worse than 90s, 80s, 2000s race cars when it comes to actually trying to manhandle and manipulate a vehicle that doesn't necessarily want to be pushed around a track in a way that produces fast lap times. And there's also the big elephant in the room that most people won't say, but I will, because I just say the truth. The fact is, Assetto Corsa, the original one, the one with all the great spaghetti pasta sauce in it, not the new one that's it's like a dried pasta. The fact is, to have these vehicles actually drive properly and be dynamic and have that balance at the limit, you need a realistic driving simulator with a realistic tyre model that actually bites onto the track and really allows you to hold combined slip to some extent. Not that AC is perfect, but you know, there's some cars in AMS1, there's some stuff in R-Factor 2, but AC very consistently does it across all the content, and also crucially gives you that force feedback to immediately allow you to know what's going on, to actually work with the vehicles exactly as you would in a real car, though you'd feel it through your body in a real car rather than just through a steering wheel. Unfortunately, we are cursed in Simland without G-forces, though that does make things more comfortable, so it's not all bad for those of you that get motion sick quite easily. If you don't believe me, you need to get this mod and just experience it for yourself. Look at this video footage. How much more dynamic does this look to watch? Like the pedal inputs I'm doing, the heel and towing, the H-pattern shifting, the way the car is bouncing over the track bumps. Admittedly, this version of Alton Park is a little bit too bumpy, but it's actually quite fun nonetheless. But the way the vehicle still has a degree of poise to it and a degree of track purchase, despite all that movement, despite everything that's going on. Everything is really like intentional with you having a huge amount of control. Go on YouTube and watch onboards from 80s, 90s, 2000s touring cars, you know, vintage onboards, and watch how the wheel is moving in those cars and how the driver's responding to things and how stuff is moving around. It's exactly the same process. Especially, you need a direct drive wheel, unfortunately. If you've got really nice equipment, it just lines up. It literally just lines up, like without even trying. It's like, oh, hang on, this game is mirroring that physical, really compelling nature of more vintage driving, where drivers had to wear loafers in the car and were drunk half the time. So absolutely incredible, and I just wish this was more. This is what esport with sim racing had more of. I want to see really talented sim racers push to their limits in more dynamic vehicles with simulators that have more dynamic physics and allow people to actually balance at the limit. Obviously, you know, when an esports driver is going to be putting so much time into it, things will start to get like smooth is fast, and they will learn how to drive it. You can watch dirt rally hot lap stuff, and they make those look relatively smooth, and that's rally cars. So I know it will smooth out ultimately when esports drivers get really pro. But the fact of the matter is, the more dynamic or tricky a vehicle is, and the more that the playable limit there is in a driving simulator with its time model, the more opportunities will occur for racing action, or even for mistakes to happen that other drivers can then exploit. Exactly like in real life. I mean, you look at a lot of modern race driving, it's so dull, and there's lots of overtakes, but it's just so placid, and you know, because the tyres they're using, the length of the vehicles, the way it's all so hyper dialed in, the tracks as well don't help. I mean, geez, like Valencia, Paul Ricard. I don't actually mind Paul Ricard too much, but I mean, we need to save real racing, and sim racing needs to not be destroyed by real racing, because it doesn't need to be. 1950s to 70s racetracks, Alton Park, Brands Hatch, you know, I mean, I like Road Atlanta. There's loads of great tracks, and there's loads of really great cars like this that are just phenomenal to drive. That's what I'm saying. The GT3 disease and boring tyre model disease and boring force feedback disease and literalitis, we should call it, needs to be stopped for everybody's health in sim racing, for people that actually like to drive and experience the joy of moving an object through a racetrack. It needs to be stopped now, guys. But this mod was great. This mod was great, and that's what sparked off this rant. Go and get it. It speaks for itself. It just speaks for itself. So fun to drive. Let me know in the comments what you think. Vintage cars better for esports generally? Or maybe do we just stick to GT3 in sims with boring tyre models and dull force feedback? What do you think, guys? Oh, it'll be a delightful comment section, as it always is. The last video was great. I had some well good complaints. I enjoy them. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, but most importantly, follow us on Twitter and Twitch and Discord, and make yourself a cup of tea. Or don't do any of them if you're a compulsive person that disagrees with everything I say. Or do. Haha, now you're confused.